Welcome to Talks with Summer, seeing the world through the eyes of another. Today I have with me Nicole. Welcome, Nicole. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. My name is Nicole, and because my story is occasionally a little sensitive, I have decided not to use my last name because I have family members far and wide who may or may not come across this. So that's just sort of my preference. That's why I'm not using my last name. Anyone who already knows the story will figure it out. I was born in Burbank, California, prematurely to an unwed teenage mother. My adoption was arranged ahead of time through lawyers. My parents in New York did not think that they could have children, so they went the route of adoption. My birth mother was actually dancing at a Jewish wedding the night I was born with the doctor who delivered me, who didn't even realize she was pregnant. She had preeclampsia and started to, I guess, go into shock. So they rushed her to the hospital, St. Joseph's. We both almost died in the process. I was born at 3 pounds, 3 ounces. I was in an incubator for 2 weeks. And then my parents came and took me home, and I grew up on the Upper East Side of New York City. I know it sounds fancy, but it wasn't. A year and a half later, my brother Christopher came along, and it was just the two of us for the first 5 years. Ran a nursery school. One of my sisters was basically left there. Her parents never came to pick her up, and my mother adopted her. In the meantime, my mother had another son, so there were 4 of us. And then when I was 11, my parents got separated, and eventually my mother adopted 2 more children over a period of 10 years. So when I went off to college, she had an infant at home. I had always been curious my whole life, but I had a very difficult and wonderful childhood. I was also diagnosed at the age of 7 with ADHD and put on Ritalin at a very young age, which I was on until I went to college. That was not the days where people were very positive about it. Now everybody has it, and late stage diagnosis and all that. Nobody ever talks about early stage diagnosis. And I was in public school, which was wonderful at the time until 5th grade. And I had always been in a very multicultural environment, being in New York. And I absolutely loved that. In fact, I had a really good friend who was from Pakistan. And I used to go to her house at the end of the day and sit on the floor, eat with my hands, and learn how to eat spicier and spicier and spicier food. And I was very close to the family. So I had sort of a myriad of an international troupe of friends. Then in 5th grade, when it was time for me to switch schools, my parents sent me to Catholic school because they wanted me to be in an environment where there were smaller classes. The only thing is, I didn't really grow up with religion of any kind. I had been exposed to many different kinds of religions through my friends, but my parents divulged the ADHD, so everybody knew that I had it. Well, my teachers. And there was a lot of negativity around it and a lot of difficulty for me because Ritalin was also not time released in those days. So I spent most of my mornings high as a kite and most of my afternoons asleep on my desk. I was lucky that there were also a lot of athletics, which I thrived at. And we even got to take riding lessons at a barn across town on the west side that had horses, and we would ride in Central Park. And I absolutely thrived in those environments. Additionally, my parents sent me to sleepaway summer camp at the age of 7 for 3 months. And I learned, again, how to ride horses, how to camp in the rain, how to build fires. It was a wonderful place, how to shoot rifles. Those were the days where there weren't a lot of safety precautions. So I lived for the summers. It was really my happy place.
Since you were adopted at such a young age, when did your parents tell you that you were adopted?
As soon as I was old enough to understand.
Okay.
But they always went out of their way to tell me that I was chosen. You know, they tried to compensate for it. In fact, I was told that my birth mother's name was Doris. And when my mother would take me to the grocery store with her, there was a checkout lady whose name was Doris. And I thought she was my birth mother. I was a very open, loving, inclusive child. And I think that's remained with me into my adulthood. Growing up in New York, you know, you get a little misunderstood because you're gruff and you're direct, but I've always been hypersensitive. I think that is part of the ADHD from what I understand. I also have other gifts that I didn't know were gifts until recently because I was teased, I was bullied, I was called stupid, lazy. At one point in my life, somebody, and this is a very un-PC word, called me retarded because oxygen had been held from my brain at birth. Nobody except in athleticism pursuits. I also learned to swim in summer camp, and that was my happy place. The pool, the ocean, you know, the water. To this day, am an excellent swimmer. But it was a very negative, difficult experience. High school was very hard. I was in school only with girls. It was a Catholic school. I knew nothing, like I said, about religion. So when I got to school, we had chapel every morning and high mass every Thursday, and I knew nothing. I didn't know when to stand up, when to sit down, when to make the sign of the cross. I wasn't allowed to take the host because I wasn't baptized. I finally got baptized Episcopalian when I was 13 because I wanted to fit in with everybody else.
My sister and I also went to an all-girl Christian convent growing up in India because it was the best one in the city and our parents decided. So it was quite an experience. And we are not very religious, but we are from another religion and we did follow it at that time. So I felt it was very enriching because I grew up at such a young age. We grew up with this idea that it was multi-faith and God is one. So in a certain light, I always look back at it and I feel glad that it happened.
That's wonderful. I was not so lucky. I found it to be very exclusive and not very promoting of other religions. But I had a lot of wealthy kids that I went to school with, but it was also a very international environment because it was the place to send your girls to get a very good education. So that I did get. I didn't realize it until I went to college and I was sitting next to people who couldn't find anything on a map, you know, and I excelled in history and horrible at math, great at history, and we had Russian history, Japanese history, American history, and I loved that. I also didn't do well in English classes because I struggled with my writing, part of the ADHD, and homework was always horrible for me. We were actually the first class to have computers, and the computers really helped me because I'm a very visual person. So eventually, fast forward, I've been very lucky. I have family in France, in Paris. I got to go to school there at the American University for, I think it was 7 months. And it was wonderful. And when I came back, one of my classmates had been a newspaper journalist. And I moved around a lot when I was younger. So I had lived in Phoenix for a year, got a job at Tempe Camera Repair, and all the guys that worked there taught me everything they knew. So after a year, my friend said to me, come back to New Jersey. I think I can get you a job as a photographer. And she did. And not only did I excel at it, I won awards every year, first place, New Jersey Press Association. And I found my thing. And I was so good at it. I'm still so good at it. I still do it. I'm a visual person. I'm a visual learner. And I really found my niche. When I was at the newspaper at the age of 27, my birth mother found me, which was stunning to me. She came looking for me. At that point, I wasn't really interested anymore. I mean, I grew up with all these stories in my head, imagining all sorts of things. And she found me, and we spent a year corresponding. But she had sent my mother letters and pictures of the family. And my mother took me out to dinner. And within an instant, not all my questions, a lot of my questions were answered. I got to see people that looked like me. So we talked on the phone for about a year, and then we decided to meet. It was very nice. We actually met in Florida at Disney World, of all places. When I say my mother, I mean the woman who raised me. So let me preface that. And then when I say my birth mother, this is the woman who gave birth to me. So the only thing is she wouldn't tell me who my father was right away.
Yes.
And I didn't realize it, but that was a pattern with her. So she said she wanted to find him first. She never told him she was pregnant. So she never gave him the option, and she didn't want to marry him. She never told him. And when I was 27, she found him, called him on the phone, and said, guess what? You have a daughter. So I talked to him about a week later, and he was amazing. He said, I could never reject you. I know you're my child. He had his idiosyncrasies, but he loved me out of the gate. He was in the floral business, actually. And when I was at the newspaper, I was living in a small town in New Jersey in an attic apartment. The day after Valentine's Day, I came home and there was a bouquet of flowers waiting for me, and I couldn't imagine where they came from. And when I opened the card, it said, sorry, I was late twice. Love, Dad. And he passed away in 2005, and I still miss him very much. We were very close. I think it was hard for my siblings. My mother did take me aside when this started to happen and said, you're getting an opportunity that the other kids may never have. I have always been careful not to go on and on about it with them, or they all know, but I respect that boundary, for their feelings. What was funny is my brother that I grew up with closest to me is Christopher. My birth father, had one son. His name was Christopher. My birth mother had one son, two sons, actually. Her first son was also Christopher. So I had three brothers named Christopher now. But the weird thing is that when I went to Florida to meet my birth mother, she introduced me to one of my other brothers, Rose. She didn't tell her older son, Christopher. And she couldn't and wouldn't and didn't, for whatever reason. She was worried he was going to feel like he was no longer the oldest and he was going to have issues. And a year went by, and his brother finally told him, guess what? You have a sister. And that's how he found out. Now I back to my father. I go to Florida to meet him and the whole side of that family. And it was like something out of a movie. In those days, everybody could wait at the gate for you. And it was a huge pile of people all waiting for me. And my little brother, Christopher, came running up to me. He was the first one. He looked up at me and went, oh my God. And I looked down at him and went, oh my God. And then I was hugged and kissed and embraced by this huge group of people. It was overwhelming. I was so welcomed. And my father's wife, who I call my stepmother, looked at me and said, I hope you will think of me as your mother too. It was, it was very special. There was a lot of love there. And at one point, my father and my brother, we all took off our shoes to see if our feet looked alike. It was the first time in my life that I looked very much like my father and my brother. And it was the first time in my life I had experienced that kind of, and I knew where I got my sensitivity from. I also knew where I got my temper from. And fast forward, I had a 10-year, little more than 10-year relationship with my birth mother. And on my 30th birthday, she took me to Monroe County, North Carolina, to meet my great grandmother and my uncles and my great uncles. And she had also been adopted and she found her birth family.
Okay.
So I was meeting that side of the family for the first time. On that trip, she gave me a ring that had belonged to my grandmother. It was also close to my birthday. And then I didn't find out until later that she didn't tell anybody about me until the day before I arrived. So hence we see the pattern again. I have this wonderful relationship with my father, with my brother, but there was this missing piece. My other brother, Christopher, in California, because it was so awkward, I don't think he knew what to do. He was getting married. He had a lot going on. I sent him a gift and a card for his wedding, but we really didn't have any contact, and I just figured he didn't want to. It was complicated for him. Fast forward to 9/11. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from my birth mother that basically said, all foreigners and American Indians need to remember this country was founded on Christian values. I wrote her back and I said, Dear Judy, which was her name, I said, I love you, but please don't send me these kinds of emails. I find them very upsetting. 3 weeks later, I don't remember if we spoke on the phone after that. It was maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. I get a FedEx envelope in the mail from her. And I thought, oh, she's sending me something, because occasionally she sent me a blanket my great grandmother had made for me. It was needlepoint. Well, she would send odd pictures and things like that. This time there was a box. In the box was a Post-it note that said, send me back my grandmother's ring. At first, I thought maybe she just wanted to copy it. It never dawned on me. So I called her a couple times and she never replied to me. I think the third or fourth time I called her, I was crying on her answering machine, asking her to tell me what I did wrong. She never replied to me. My birth father called her, and she wouldn't tell him. She said, it's between me and her. And my father said to me, because he couldn't imagine anyone doing that, he said, what did you do? And I said, I didn't do anything. I guess it was the email. I mean, in many ways, to this day, I don't know. No, when I realized that she was cutting me off and rejecting me again, for the second time in my life, after coming and looking for me, I basically put the ring in the box. I sent it back to her. I threw away everything she ever gave me. I cut up all the pictures. And any friend I had whose mother I was close to was mortified. My mother was mortified. Everybody was so upset. I was upset. And when you have ADHD, you tend to be rejection sensitive. But that was a big one. So fast forward to COVID, we're on lockdown in New York. And one day I opened my Instagram and I saw that there was a message there. It said, "Hey, Nicole." I said, "How are you? It's been a very, very long time." And he said, "Hey, Nicole, I'm good. It has been a long time. I hope you are good considering everything going on in the world. I've been reluctant to contact you because I felt like my contact might be unwarranted. I'm probably overthinking that, and I guess I'm over it. I have thought a lot about you and what it would be like to talk to you." Sorry, getting over a cold is a little emotional, but this was Chris in California, my birth mother's son.
Yes.
He had always been curious. I had always been curious. He didn't know the story, but he knew his mother's ways. He knew she was difficult and tricky. She didn't always tell the truth. And he was very clear that he knew that. So I told him what happened. He was very upset and said he had to control himself from calling his mother because he was so angry. And he had a son who was now 25, who actually visited New York, and I got to spend some time with my nephew. But I lost the chance of watching him grow. But my brother and I, both my brother, have wonderful relationships. And I actually called him before I was going to do this to ask for the blessing. And he said, "Go for it." He even told me I could use his last name if I wanted to.
I have to say in between and interrupt you that I'm so thankful for you to be sharing all of this and being so vulnerable. I keep asking questions, but your stories, it moved me when I first heard it, and it still moves me a lot. And I'm really, really thankful to you for opening your heart to me and to everybody who's going to listen to this.
Thank you. I have to say I've been very lucky in many ways. I have a troop of the most wonderful friends. I was very sick this year for about 5.5 months. I had a 12-hour emergency surgery. It was intestinal. The people that came from far and wide to take care of me, I have the most amazing friends that hail from all over the world, and a wonderful family in Paris. What I omitted was a couple of people who really were like surrogate parents to me, especially my Uncle Alex, who mentored my photography. My friends are my blessing. Growing up in a very, very crowded adversarial when you have 5 siblings, and my mother worked full time and a lot. And so, back in the 70s, it was me and my brother Christopher I grew up with. It was our job to take care of the other kids. So, a lot of shenanigans.
Do you ever think in hindsight that if you had found out later, it might have been different for you to process at an older age?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And if I had had my birth mother find me at 16, it would have been a disaster. Being a teenager was very difficult, and all the negativity that was surrounded with school and with the ADHD and the tutors and the therapists and the homework fights constantly. My brother Christopher, who I grew up with, has his PhD in classical piano music theory. He tied the shoes before me. He was reading before me, and he's a year and a half younger. My parents were very well educated, very talented, apart from their careers, artists, just musicians, I can't draw a circle, but the photography is mine. It's still mine. I still do it as a side job. And it is the one thing I think in my life where I'm just like, get out of my way. I know how good I am. And it is the one place that has really built my confidence. It caused some problems when I was at the newspaper with the older photographers who just weren't as good and couldn't believe that I'm self-taught. I never went to school for it. Self-taught.
Okay.
It was my thing out of the gate. I'm blessed. My brothers love me. My stepmother loves me. I have, like I said, I have a troop of the most amazing friends. who love me unconditionally. Some I've had for 40 years, and some are a little newer than that. That adoption story is not my whole story.
Yes.
But she did try to reach out to me on social media last year because my brother had to finally tell her we were in contact.
Okay.
And she said, well, I hope we can be in touch one day too. And for me, that's never going to happen.
Did she ever tell you why she never told your birth father?
Yeah, she said she didn't want to marry him. She wasn't in love with him. Basically, she was living in the Haight-Ashbury in California. She went for a job for the airlines, and she had to fly to Florida because I think it was like Delta or one of the Floridian airlines. And the only person that she knew in Florida was my father, so she called him up.
Okay.
They got really drunk, and I was conceived at the hotel airport in Miami. So that was that story. But he was crazy about her. He used to drive 3 hours and she'd go out on dates with other people. When he passed away, I found, because mostly her best friend would write to him what she was up to, I found the whole truth. He saved everything. We had to go through everything, and I found all these letters. But amongst those letters, I found a letter that my birth mother had written to him 6 months after I was born, the day before her birthday, talking about all the things she wanted to do with her life, never telling him about my birth, never saying, well, she almost died, I almost died, never divulging anything, but still communicating with him.
And was he married himself?
At the time, no. Eventually, he did get married to my stepmother. She's still a big part of my life. Yeah. And my aunt, his sister, and my cousins who barely knew me and asked me to do a reading at their wedding. Now that my father is gone, there's a little less communication from that side. People get older, and with my brothers, my stepmother, and my brother here in New York at 58 had a surprise. He and his wife had a surprise this year. And I have a niece.
Congratulations.
I'm a dad. 2 little girl. Everyone else has boys. She's the only girl. I take her to school 3 days a week. She's getting everything I have. She is a treasure that I never thought would happen. And we even look alike, which is stunning. And my brother tells me all the time, he says, oh, the two of you look alike. And he and I always looked alike when we were little. So people would have never known we were adopted unless I didn't tell the whole world. I told everybody, which drove my mother crazy because I thought it was so cool.
What was your mother's and father's perspective through all of this?
The father I grew up with was gone by the time I was 16. He passed away.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We weren't close.
What was your mother's perspective through all of this?
She's always been very supportive about it. She's a very tough, very complicated person, but she has always been very supportive. I'm very careful with my boundaries. And that's why, in a way, this podcast, this story it's a little uncomfortable because it's only my close friends know, really. And
Yes.
it's to put it out in the universe is hard. I don't think that people understand what it's like to grow up not knowing anything about yourself, about where you got your personality from, your sensitivity from, your joy, your love of animals or whatever. Some of it's nurture, but I know I was with certain qualities that I have. I know I was born with, and I wouldn't have known that had I not met my birth family. I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity, even if it came with that pain. I'm so grateful, especially after the illness. I know time is short. I just take great joy in so many things, my friends especially, and my extended family, and my family, and my niece, which, oh my God, I'm sick every other week because I can't stop like hugging her and kissing her. I've had a lot of surprises, really good ones, that things I never thought would happen. I feel very lucky. It may be a bit of a sad story. I'm incredibly resilient. And my best friend once said to me, bullets bounce off of you.
Yes, it's a very inspiring story and it shows your character. And I am privileged and lucky that I'm being able to share it with everybody. And one of my desires is that there's so many people who would hear your story and they'll get strength from it and their pain will be validated.
I hope so.
I really desire and hope, and that's one of my aims, that your story is going to pull out stories who might have some similarities and they'll find the courage and the validation and the strength to also open up and share their stories.
And I want to say one last thing, and that is I beat myself up all the time because of the ADHD. And I have a very good career. I'm in research now, supporting scientists and grants and contracts. And last year I had an ADHD therapist who was a specialist. And for the first time in my life, somebody said to me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. She said, you have some executive functioning issues. She said, but you're highly intelligent and it saves you. And nobody had ever said that to me before. And it really gave me a sense of peace. I still struggle because I want to be like everybody else. I want to be self-regulating. I mean, with ADHD, there's so many things. I don't want to say normal, but I'm also learning to embrace the gifts because of all the people who are talking about it positively now and about what a gift it can be for so many things.
I truly believe that also because I do a lot of reading and I do not have formal education in this side of things, but from my personal interest, because I'm an artist and Vincent van Gogh is one of the people I study a lot and what his life was like. I would definitely like to share this with you that hopefully in the future I can make my study more formal, but it's one of my strong beliefs and knowings that it's what is seen as an illness and what is characterized as a disorder is in fact a blessing and a gift.
You know what? We were the hunters, we were the gatherers, we were the protectors. And when we switched from, that type of society to sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day, people who had those strengths and who had that personality type were basically screwed. So.
Is there any advice you would give your younger self looking back at your life now from your whole story?
It's exactly what I said, that there's nothing wrong with you. You're highly intelligent, a kind person, and you will form wonderful and deep relationships with people who will support you and love you unconditionally.
What is something which is very close to your heart, or what is something you are passionate about?
My friends, traveling, and my photography. I'm a former newspaper photographer. I also really love my current job as a research grants manager for Safety Net Hospital. Also, since I have so many friends in other countries, like I said, I absolutely love traveling to visit them, and I love introducing them to the rest of my tribe.
Who has been the most influential person in your life and how have they impacted you?
There are several. My grandmother, who gave me the most unconditional love and wonderful food I've ever felt in my life. My uncle in Paris, who actually also was a self-taught chef, but he was a war photographer, a war videographer for 30 years. And he fostered and mentored my photography career and was very much a surrogate father to me. I can't admit my amazing friends and extended family. They're the anchors of my life who helped me grow into the person I am now. And then also my nieces and my brothers, especially, all of them.
What do you feel the purpose of life is for you? Or, in other words, what do you feel is your personal quest in life?
I really struggle with self-care and my confidence. I wish I was more self-regulating. I'm always trying to work on this. My quest is to learn to love myself and my quirks and quiet the negative voices in my head.
Is there any book, quote, or philosophy that has shaped your outlook on life?
There are two. First one is by Walt Whitman, and it's from Leaves of Grass. I'm going to try not to cry getting through it, but this is what you shall do. Love the earth, the sun, and the animals. Despise riches, give alms to everyone that asks, stand up for the stupid and crazy, devote your income and labor to others, hate tyrants, argue not concerning God, have patience and indulgence towards the people, take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons and with the young and the mothers of families. Read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul. And your very flesh shall be a great poem and have the richest fluency, not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and its face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body. And the second one is the famous Theodore Roosevelt quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory or defeat."
If it were an ideal world, what would that look like in your eyes?
Inclusion and care of the less fortunate and disadvantaged.
What is something that you would like the world to know about you, which you feel is often misunderstood?
I grew up in New York. I lived in France, in Paris, so I can sometimes be a little too direct. I talk too much, and I sometimes have a hard time with frustration. I have difficult times in crowds, but I love exploring cities with a lot of people.
From your entire journey in life so far, what would you like to share with our listeners which you feel would be helpful to them?
I think what I've already told you, the story of finding my birth family, of how some people can love you unconditionally from the get-go, but that story also comes with a lot of pain. But it comes with more joy than pain.
And there's so much love, and love is all that matters. Thank you, Nicole. This has been very moving for me, and it's very thankful that you agreed to come here and be so open and show your heart to everybody.
Thank you very much for asking me, and I wish you all the success in the world. I hope if my story helps one person, then I'll be happy. Thank you for giving me this platform and this opportunity. I can't wait to see the rest of your podcast. I think it's wonderful. You have my full support. Knowing yours and your sister's story gave me the bravery to tell mine. And I hope you will tell yours one.
To know more about what I do and offer, visit my website, samroshni.com, or find me on Instagram at samroshni coaching. Thank you.